Coming up on the Mind Caddy.
What would your answer to be for somebody listening to this and a golfer saying, why do I need to know about ground reaction forces? What is that knowledge actually going to give me as a golfer to potentially improve?
I mean, to me, it's the engine of your swing. And so, my analogy to a lot of people that don't really understand it is biomechanics is the physics of the human body. The biggest kind of sales pitch for force plates or why it's super important is because you cannot see this with your eye
No.
or your iPhone or your fancy motion capture system. All of these things are hidden from you, basically. They're invisible. But if you don't own your stock, how do you adjust on the golf course? Whatever you're working on in your golf swing, going to the range and playing the Goldilocks game is one of the best things you can do.
Knowing the way golfers are, I can see a bunch of people getting a set of left-handed clubs just in case.
Mind Caddy.
Hello, Scott. Thanks very much for joining me on the show.
Thank you for having me. This is, I like doing these. I like kind of getting out of my comfort zone, talking to people that are maybe in different areas of the game or look at things a little bit differently. I always learn something, and that's the goal, kind of to get better all the time. So I'm excited for this, whatever this is, hour, whatever we end up doing here.
Yeah, see where it goes. I know we've been introduced. I was aware of your work, but we've been introduced by a mutual colleague and friend of ours, Nick Middleton from Zen Greens, which I've known Nick for many years. But for those who perhaps don't know of you, Scott, and your work and your background, maybe if you could just sort of fill in a little bit of a history of what's brought you to this point in golf before we get into the nuts and bolts of ground reaction forces.
Sure. So I grew up in Toronto, Canada. Played ice hockey growing up a bunch. That was kind of the first sport I took up. But I always tell the story. I have a younger brother who's 18 months younger than me and an older brother who's 26 months older than me. So there were three brothers, all very close in age. And my dad was an avid golfer, but my mother made him give up the game when we were very young because I don't think she was going to let him go to the golf course for 6 hours on a Saturday and leave her alone with the three little guys.
Three kids.
So his goal is to get us into the game as quickly as possible so that he could now have the excuse to go back and play again. And it worked with me and my little brother. My older brother didn't like the game so much. It didn't work with him, but I became a golf nut. And for those, I know you're based in the UK. My grandmother grew up in a place called Pittenweem, Scotland, which is just around the bay from St. Andrews. So you got to go by Kingsbarns and she was an avid golfer as well. And so she got my dad into it, then my dad got us into it. And so it was a game that I've always really loved. And then I got into kinesiology as an academic pursuit. So that's what I did for my undergraduate studies. And then I kept going to school. I did a master's in biomechanics and then a PhD in biomechanics, but it was in orthopedic biomechanics. So it was in studying how people with knee arthritis walk and the forces they put on their knees and how that could lead to the development of cartilage wear and arthritis. And I learned a lot from it, but and so where I went to school was 2.5 hours from Toronto, where I grew up. So I went to school in a place called Kingston, Ontario. And in the summer times in grad school, I still had a golf membership in Toronto. So I would work Monday to Thursday in Kingston. And then Thursday afternoon at noon, I would take off and drive 2.5 hours back to Toronto. And then I'd play golf Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then get in the car and drive back and do the whole thing again. And I don't know how it is, in the summertime in the UK, but Thursday afternoon at the golf course that I was a member at was not super busy. Like if you showed up at 3 or 4 in the afternoon on a Thursday, you can get out. And all my buddies in Toronto had real jobs where they were working till 5 or 6 p.m. And so I had nobody to play with. So I would just show up and join whoever was there. And there was an older guy who just happened to be there most Thursdays at that time, and we ended up joining together and playing together most Thursdays and became pretty friendly. So we played golf most Thursdays together. And I remember there was one point during that summer where he was telling me, you know how you chat on the golf course about wherever it goes, and he was telling me that, and he was retired, that he had made a fortune in insurance his whole life. Right. He had made a lot of money in insurance. That's what allowed him to have this nice membership and do a lot of other things. And I remember he was setting up for a shot once, and he's like, you know what? I hated every minute of it. He's like, it provided the lifestyle that I wanted, but the job was a job. It was a means to an end.
He didn't enjoy doing that
He
job.
didn't enjoy doing, and he's like, you know what, you got to find a way to make work less like work. And then he hit the ball and walked off, and I was like, And then the
Might
next
be
week,
something in that.
yeah, the next week I went back to do my knee arthritis work, and I started, man, this is way too much like work, this knee arthritis stuff. But I stuck it out. I finished it. I got my degree in biomechanics, and then I finished at the start of September, which is basically the worst time to finish a PhD because all the jobs start at the start of September as well. So, or I finished at the end of September, I think it was. So basically, I had to wait a whole year to get a job. And so from the end of September until like January, I stayed in the little town that I had done my PhD in, and I was working at that gym doing some personal training, and I was publishing my academic papers. But I actually snuck into the biomechanics lab at night because to graduate, you had to hand back your keys to the lab. And so when I graduated, I handed back my keys, but one of my friends was leaving at night, and I kind of stuck a little thing in the door and snuck in. And I did a covert mission golf biomechanics study. So I went to the little golf shop around the corner, and this was 2007. So before simulators were a thing and launch monitors, and I bought a little thing that had a little metal and a ball and a string. So when you hit it, it just spun around instead of flying anywhere. And I put that thing down, and I brought my buddies, because I actually played and coached the golf team at my university. So I brought the whole golf team into the lab and put markers on them and had them hit with their foot on the force plate and measured basically the torques on their knee as they hit balls. And I looked at the difference between flaring your foot and keeping your foot straight. Because a lot of golf teachers talk about, oh, you should flare that foot or you should keep it straight. And because of my, interest in knee stresses from my PhD, I just did this little covert mission golf biomechanics study as part of, because I was, hanging around and I didn't have much else to do. Ended up publishing that paper and presenting it at like a big academic conference, the World Scientific Congress of Golf, which we're bringing to California in 2027. So that'll be at the Titleist Performance Institute in 2027. So stay tuned for that. Anyways, and I remember working on that paper and thinking like, wow, this isn't like work. Like, this is kind of fun. Like, I want to know the answer to this question, and I'm using these skills that I had learned. And that kind of led me down the path of thinking that I wanted to do golf biomechanics as a career, but that wasn't a thing at the time. Like, nobody was doing golf biomechanics really anywhere in 2007. And so I had to, I applied for jobs, trying to tell them that I wanted to do golf biomechanics. And one of the papers that came out around that time, like an academic paper, said that walking around a golf is around 10,000 steps. And all the physiologists would say that walking 10,000 steps is like the minimum physical activity requirement. And my whole story was, well, if we can get people to play more golf and walk more, then we could meet our minimum physical. So all you need is one round of golf a day, and you've met your physical activity requirements and all the benefits of that. And I remember doing an interview for a job I applied for in Canada, and they said, that's great and all, but what are they going to do for the other 7 months of year where the snow's up to their knees and they can't? And I was like, I don't know. So I didn't get a job in my own country. So then I applied for jobs in the U.S., and I think I got an interview for every job that I had applied for in the U.S., and I wasn't really sure I wanted to move to the U.S., but then this job here at Cal State Fullerton in Orange County, California came up, and they asked me to come down for an interview, and it was February of 2008, and I had to trudge through 3 feet of snow to get to the airport and chisel the ice off my car to get there. And I land here, and it's, 75 degrees, whatever, 25 Celsius, sunny, beautiful. And then I started talking to the people around the university during my interview, and a lot of them had a lot of roles outside of the university. So we had a very famous sports psychologist that worked at Cal State Fullerton, a guy named Ken Ravizza, who was really big in the baseball world. And he kind of forged the path.
He actually wrote a book about baseball, didn't he?
He did, yeah. And so he forged the path because traditionally academics were thought to be, teaching and in the lab doing research. Like, being outside of the university consulting and doing stuff in the real world was like almost looked down upon at the time.
Right.
But he convinced everyone at the university that, hey, no, that's a good thing. Because, and I remember when I first got here, I had a student in my office, and I asked her what courses she's taking this semester. And she says, I'm taking and I'm taking sports psychology. And I was like, oh, are you taking it from Ken, or are you taking it from the other lady that taught sports psychology here? And she's like, well, Ken, for sure. And I was like, why? And she's like, well, he can teach you how he got, one of the best baseball players in the world out of a slump one time.
Yeah.
And this other lady teaches you about something she read in a book one time. Like, who
Right.
would you want to really
Applied.
learn from? Yeah.
Mm.
And so this university is a little bit different. They value their professors. And I think that whole thing is starting to evolve with the way academia is going now. I know there's a lot of academics now who are out in the real world doing real things on podcasts and kind of a
Yeah.
knowledge translation thing. So anyways, I was really drawn to this university and the academics here. And so I made the decision to move down here by myself. Didn't know anyone in California really. Came down here in 2008. And they were really into it, so they started a biomechanics lab here. We have an alumni of Cal State Fullerton who is a really big golfer and helped fund a lot of my lab and setting up all the launch monitors and simulators and force plates and all the stuff that we need. So I've been doing work at the university here for a really long time. Since 2008, I've been doing golf biomechanics work here. And then in 2015, I got connected with a company called Swing Catalyst. It was actually, I was at the 2015 Open Championship at St. Andrews. We took my dad there for his 75th birthday. And I was walking the fairways and got a call from Sean Foley, who's a pretty, recognized golf instructor. And he's a good friend of mine, Canadian as well. And he said, and he was one of the first adopters of Swing Catalyst. He had been one of the first users. And I guess earlier that week, Swing Catalyst they're a Norwegian-based company, and they had a guy who does used to do what I do for them now, but he wasn't a golfer, so he was an academic. So he did things that an academic would do, and he tried to explain it to these golf teachers, and they'd get kind of frustrated, and then they'd explain back to him in like golf speak, and then he'd get frustrated, and so he just says, "Forget this, I'm gonna move on." So I think it helps that I have played at a relatively decent level
of the game,
and I understand the game, and I also understand the science, and I think. Through Swing Catalyst, one of the first jobs they gave me was to go to a local PGA section meeting in Kansas City, in Missouri, in California, or in the U.S. here, and do a lecture for all the local PGA pros. And I did one of the original lectures, like down the cart, or one of the first ones of the day. And then I sat around and watched the rest of them. And the keynote that day was a guy named Mike Adams. And I don't know if you are aware of his teachings, but he got up there and he said, everybody swings a club differently.
Yeah. Everybody's got a different body type.
Everybody's got a different body type. Everybody's got different movement patterns. And therefore we have to have different drills, different things for people, different. And he went through his little screens and tests that he puts people through to determine what's optimal for you. And I was like, ooh, I gotta talk to this guy.
That's different.
Because just before that, I had done a study because I got really interested in the ground reaction forces even before working with Swing Catalyst. I really liked how the golfer interacts with the ground. I thought that was really important to understand. And so one of the first studies I did in around 2009 or 10 at Cal State Fullerton was I got access to 2 NCAA golf teams. So I brought in the Cal State Fullerton men and women's team, and then the Long Beach State men and women team. So it was about 10 men and 10 women per team. So it was 40 golfers total. And these are all plus handicaps that shoot under par regularly, really good players. And I just put them on the force plates and I had them hit their stock shots. And then I went to my kinesiology class, who are young athletic kids, right? If you're taking kinesiology, you're an athlete, you probably played a sport, you like sports. And I said, if you've ever hit a golf ball but never had a formal lesson, you can be a student or a subject in my study. So like if you go into the range with your dad, or you go to the golf course with your buddies, whatever. But if you've never had a formal lesson, and I got 40 of them. So through all my kinesiology, we have, I forget how many hundreds of students we have here, but I was able to recruit 40 beginner golfers, people who had hit a golf ball before but never had a formal lesson. And I got all this data and I started looking at it and I got very confused because even in the good players, the range of what they did in terms of their ground reaction forces was all over the map. Like literally the graphs were everywhere. Like some people would have a peak here, other people wouldn't have a peak there. Some people it would be way over here. Some people, and I was like, I got really confused. So then what I did is I made a graph, and this is what you do a lot of times, where I put all the beginner golfers in red and all the good golfers in blue, let's say. And I just made these scatter plots of all the different ground reaction forces. And I took it across the hall to my colleague, who is a biomechanist, and he understands how to read the graphs. And I said, guess who's who? Guess which one, the blue or the red, are the good golfers? And he guessed wrong. And I was like, oh, geez.
Oh God, this is not what it should have shown
This is
up.
not, yeah. And so that really cued me to, and so that, and I published it. I had to use a very fancy statistical technique called principal components analysis to even find anything in that big mess of data. But I ended up publishing it, and it was my first realm into the academic world. And it's funny as an academic, like the second you publish something, it's out of date, right? Because then you've learned a
Mm,
whole bunch of other stuff. And anyway,
yeah.
so I read that old article and I'm like, yeah, it's okay, but I've learned a ton since then. Um, but then hearing Mike say, well, no, we gotta teach everybody differently. We can't just say because you're a good golfer, they do this, because good
Mm,
golfers do a million different things.
yeah.
And I
It's a
remember at the
study.
time,
It's a study of one, basically, isn't it?
totally, it's an n equals one study every time you put a human being in front of you to teach a golf lesson.
Yeah.
And Mike really led me down that path to help understand, because when I first started doing like educational stuff for Swing Catalyst, I would get in front of golf teachers or, all these people, and there would be like a center of pressure curve, or there'd be a, lateral force graph, or there'd be a vertical force graph. And like a teacher would put up their hand and say, hey, like, what should that graph look like? Like after they hit, right? They would hit on the plate and the graph would pop up, and I'd say, well, that's kind of inefficient. I'm not sure about that. And they'd be like, well, what should that graph look like? And I would always say, well, it depends. And that was my stock answer for a while, until one guy, what would your stock response to me be if I said it depends? On what, right? What does it
On what?
depend on?
On what?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I said that once. I was at a seminar. I don't remember where. I think it was in Sweden or something like that. And I was like, well, it depends. And he looks at me, he's like, on what? And I was like, ooh, I don't know. Let me figure
It's a
that
good
out.
question.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And so that's been kind of my search for the last, 2015 until now, when I first started working till Swing Catalyst, which is, a good 11 years now. I've been searching for what it depends on. And I think we're getting a lot better now in terms of understanding if this, then this, and if that, then that. And being able to solve those n equals one
Uh,
studies
uh,
when a golf
um,
teacher or when a golfer is in front of you. And
yeah.
so it's been a fun journey. I mean, but actually what has helped me a lot recently is Swing Catalyst got involved in baseball in 2016, 18 we got involved in baseball because a couple of the big teams over here in the US asked them to make a baseball system.
Right.
And so we made a baseball system. We now have 20 something major league teams out of 30 using our system. And a lot of them are kind of where we were in golf back in 2015. They have a bunch of graphs, but they don't really know how to use them. So some of the teams have asked me to help them interpret the information. One of them being my hometown team, the Toronto Blue Jays. I've been helping them quite a bit recently. And basically I took what I learned from golf to baseball, but then I've learned a ton in baseball, and I'm kind of bringing it back to golf, and I think it's kind of making
Some
me
interesting
better in all of them.
crossovers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's essentially the same skill. You're trying to produce speed with a stick in your hand. Now, where the
Mm,
ball is and how it's moving are different, but that's been very helpful to kind of look at what's
mm,
happening in baseball, and
mm.
it's kind of made me better in both. So that's a very long-winded, I guess.
No, it's a thorough history, that Scott, which is important. For those folks listening, Scott, like, just some people will have obviously heard of this, and it's interesting what you said there, that biomechanics is a relatively new thing, 2008, but it feels like it's been around forever because it's
Yeah.
so prominent now. But what would your answer to be for somebody listening to this, and a golfer saying, why do I need to know about ground reaction forces? What is that knowledge actually going to give me
Yeah.
as a golfer to potentially improve?
I mean, to me, it's the engine of your swing. And so, my analogy to a lot of people that don't really understand it is biomechanics is the physics of the human body. And whenever we talk about physics, a lot of people start with Newton's laws of motion, right? Newton's 3 laws of motion. And his first law of motion is inertia, is if you had to say it in one word, which means an object at rest stays at rest, or an object in motion stays at motion unless acted upon by an external force.
Yeah.
And the key to that statement is the word external force. Like, we need something external from our body to push on us to cause us to move.
Right. Right.
And so the only thing external to our body that we have when we're hitting a golf ball is our feet on the
It's the
ground
ground.
and our hands on the club.
Mm.
Now, our hands on the club, like when I push into the club, it pushes back into me a little bit, but it's free to move in space. So But what I'm finding now is both ends are very important to determine what happens at the ground. So I can give you a cue to use the ground a little bit differently to make the club move a little differently, or I can give you a cue to move the club a little differently to change how the ground works.
Right.
It works both ways.
Right.
And understanding both, I think, is really important. But the engine ultimately is the forces that occur from the ground and then work their way through our bodies up to the golf club. And
Right.
without without knowledge of that, I think we're just guessing, really, if we're trying to make alterations in golf swings without knowledge of what's happening to the ground. And the biggest kind of sales pitch for force plates, or why it's super important, is because you cannot see this with your eye
No.
or your iPhone or your fancy motion capture system. All of these things are hidden from you, basically. They're invisible. And so when I always tell these stories. When I first started working for Swing Catalyst, and I started doing some of Mike and I were working closely together, we talked about 3 basic ground reaction force. There's a glider force, or kind of a lateral force that golfers can produce. There's a rotation or a spinner force that you can create rotation. And then there's vertical, or like jumping up in the air. So we call them gliders, spinners, or launchers. There were 3 kind of types of golfers. And every time I'm around, very high-end golf teachers, I ask them, is it okay if I kind of search through your computer to learn some things and look through some swings? And generally they're like, yeah, it's fine. Like, don't take it, but if you can learn something from it. And so when I was at Cameron McCormick's facility in Dallas, I was able to see Jordan Spieth's swing. And, everybody's seen Jordan Spieth's swing where he kind of rolls over on that left ankle and kind of gets through like that. If you had to guess, do you think he'd be a glider, a rotator, a spinner, or a jumper? Based on that left ankle.
A glider?
You'd assume he'd be a glider, right? No, he's vertical.
Really?
The dominant force in his golf swing is up, or that vertical kind of jumping force. And without looking at, or without seeing it, I would have never, ever in a million years guessed that.
Right.
And I mean, if you put me in that position where Jordan's ankle gets into, I would snap my ankle if I tried to put that vertical force in. But I'm not Jordan Spieth. I mean, he's probably one of the most incredible athletes that ever held a golf club. And that's what I always tell people. Like, if it's Mrs. Haberkamp on the plate, sometimes you can kind of guess what forces they're producing. But as the athlete gets better, they can fool you very easily.
Don't guess.
Yeah,
Don't
what
guess.
makes an athlete a good athlete is they can do things in positions that other people can't. So Jordan Spieth can create some incredible vertical forces kind of rolled over on his ankle because he's Jordan Spieth and I'm not. And so that was one that really kind of, made me think, wow, without this, I think you could do some really big damage to Jordan Spieth's swing.
You could give him some very bad information, couldn't you?
100%. And then the other one that really led me down a path recently that helped me quite a bit was I was at Claude Harmon's facility in Florida, and he works with Dustin Johnson. So I got to see Dustin Johnson swing on the plate, and like I've always assumed, like his belt buckle is left of the target at impact, right? Dustin Johnson, you would assume he's a spinner, correct?
Yeah.
He's lateral. He has a ton of lateral force in his swing because of he's probably got some of the highest hands in golf. Where he positions that golf club. Like, if I position that golf club where he has it up here, if I was a spinner, I would tip the club this way, and I'd have no chance. And so where he positions that golf club, even though you can't see that big lateral force if you watch his golf swing, it has to be there for him to get that club to do what he needs it to do. And so that's where I was like, whoa, that's very interesting to me. So those are the 2 times where I was very much fooled, and I still am fooled often when I have good players. If I have like a, college player or a very good player. I had a player that came to see me recently, and he had qualified for 2 PGA championships. So he's a PGA pro in California here, but he had through the PGA section events and then the National PGA Championship or Club Pros Championship, he had qualified and played in 2 PGA championships. One was at Kiowa Island, and he actually made the cut, which is like to make the cut in a professional major. This guy's a good player.
You can play.
Yeah. But he said since then he has lost his game. Like since Kiowa, which was, when was Kiowa? 2022 or something like that, or 3? I don't even remember. It was whatever it was. But it's been a few years since then, and he's lost his game. He's like, I don't know where the ball's going. I'm nowhere near the player I was back then, and I don't know what I'm doing. And but what he said is his wedges are still dialed. It's when the club gets longer that things get crazy. And I looked at some of his driver swings and I made an assessment about, I think maybe this is why you're hitting it poorly, and I think we should maybe go in this direction. But then I had him hit some wedges, and I looked at his wedges and I was like, oh, wait, you're actually doing the complete opposite with your wedges. So let's go in the opposite direction. And without measuring his wedges and seeing what he was doing, which was actually getting more pressure into his trail side with his wedges than he was with his driver, which you'd think,
Really?
that's crazy.
He was getting more pressure into his trail side with his wedges than he was with his driver.
And he was hitting them way better. And so then my assessment was like, oh, forget that. We're going to actually go to do the opposite of what I thought I had to do with the driver. And I think a lot of people probably without the force plate would have gone down the path, which was my initial hypothesis without, and this is why it's an N=1 study. Like,
yeah.
But no one, and he's like, I'm dialed with my wedges. My wedges are great, but my driver is terrible. And when the clubs get longer. And so we started incorporating some of those wedge patterns that we saw into his driver, and his driver got way better again.
Really?
But he would have never gone down that path without measuring. And I would have never guessed just looking at it that was the case, because you don't see it with a wedge. It's not like he's transferring a ton of mass to the right. It's just that pressure was getting to the right, and he was creating this force that allowed him to produce good wedge shots. And that's something that I'm talking to a lot of people now. Like, I think it's very important in golf that you own your stock motion.
Yeah.
And that stock motion, it shouldn't matter what club's in your hand. Like, a lot of people think, oh, with driver, I got to, do my side bend and lean right and hit up on it. And with iron, I want to lean this way. And there are specialty shots that, require those things, but you should know what your stock motion is and know where it lives and own it. And then once you own it, you can develop those specialty shots, all the shots that are needed to play golf.
Build skills around that.
Around that. But if you don't own your stock, how do you adjust on the golf course? So if you don't own your stock and you get on the first fairway and the ball's above your feet and there's a little rough behind the ball and there's a right to left wind and there's water to the left and your dad's over there watching you, so you're nervous and the college coach is there, and like, and you don't have a process to adjust from, like, how are you're cooked before you even get started. And I learned this from in 2018, I believe. I went to the Players Championship, and because right off the driving range they have a building there, and the building was purchased and all the technology was purchased with the tour funds, right? Because TPCs are run by the tour, and so their mission is to help tour players. So that they brought us in to, if anybody wanted some advice on the swing catalyst while the tour players are all there. And it's really hard to get players to hit on, like, it's almost a major championship. So it's, we haven't done it in a while because it's kind of hard to get guys to come in. But that year, Tommy Fleetwood came in because his trainer had a theory about what Tommy Fleetwood did, and he wanted to see if it actually was the case. And whenever I have a player that comes to hit on the plates, for an assessment, I get them to hit 5-stock wedges, 5-stock mid-irons, like 6 irons, and then 5-stock drivers. And this was one of the most impressive displays of ball striking I'd ever seen. Tommy Fleetwood. Have you ever been to TPC Sawgrass?
I've not, no.
The range has 2 sides, so the players hit back at each other, like from either side of the range. So the other side of the range is, these players are hitting back at each other, and they're the best players in the world. So it has to be 500 something yards away, because, to make sure they're not actually, hitting each other with balls. And I picked a tree on the other side of the range where the other people are hitting. So that thing had to be 600 yards away. And Fleetwood, hit it in the middle of the tree with 13 of those 15 shots, and the 2 he missed were on the, it was an incredible display of ball striking. And this was the year that he went to, this was the last year the Players was in May, and then in June the US Open was at Winged Foot, and he shot a 62 or something like that in the last round. So Fleetwood was on top of his game at this point. But I remember when I gave him his wedge and I said, I just want you to hit 5-stock wedges, he looked at me and he said, but I never hit a stock wedge. And I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, whenever I hit a wedge, it's kind of a sawed-off. You'd see Fleetwood, right? He kind of hits that kind of sawed-off finish. That's a specialty shot for him. So when he gets his wedge in his hand on a golf course, it's a specialty shot. It's a stock. It's a punch, take the spin off of it, whatever, control it. But it's a specialty shot. And I was like, okay, I understand that you don't hit it on the golf course, but just make your stock motion with this club in your hand. And so he did it. Then he did it with 6-iron. Then he did it with driver. And once he left, I went through all 15 of those swings, and basically the mechanics of the swing were almost identical in all 15 of those shots.
Really?
The magnitudes of the forces went up. So with wedge, it was here, with 6-iron was here, with driver, it was there. But the relative contribution of each one of those forces to his swing were almost identical. And the amount of pressure shift he got into his trail side was almost identical with all 15 of those shots. And I was like, that is a man who owns his stock and knows how to adjust to
He's
whatever.
got ownership of his stock pattern.
Totally. And so to me, if you don't own your stock pattern, you're almost screwed before you get started. Because like when you have to make adjustments, because golf is a game of adjustments. Like
Yeah.
when there's a left or right wind and the ball's above our feet and there's rough behind
Mm.
it and whatever there's mud on the side of the ball. Like there's a million adjustments that you have to make in golf to hit good shots, to play good golf. And so if you don't know where your stock is, what are you adjusting from?
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you don't
Yeah.
know that, then you got no chance before you even got started.
Just in the dark. Yeah.
And it's just lucky.
Having said we shouldn't generalize, and it's a study of one, we're gonna have to generalize somewhat on a podcast. But for somebody exploring this, how important is the pressure distribution at address before we even start the motion? What are sort of things do you like to see to begin with?
That is the one place where people are very consistent, or the good players are very consistent. So one thing
Yeah.
I never see in a good player before they hit it is way too much towards their toes or towards their heels.
Yeah.
Because if you start way towards your toes when you're taking the club away, there's nowhere else to go towards your toes. You're going to fall over. So you're going to fall back towards your heels as you swing.
And your body will always seek balance, won't it? First and
100%. It's
foremost?
the first goal of your brain is to not fall over. And so to me, the recipe for shanks or for heel shots or for people hitting it near the hosel is to start on your heels. So if you start on your heels, there's nowhere to go once you're in motion back anymore. So you have to go forward towards the golf ball, and then Monsieur El Hosel gets introduced to the ball every once in a while, and then we have those hosel rockets and all those shots. And to me, the heel response is generally a bad player response. As I start hitting bad shot and bad shot and bad shot, I get scared. And this happens to all golfers. And what do you do when you get scared? You kind of draw in and you draw back onto your heels. And that is not where any athletic motions happen, on your heels, right? Like if you think of, if you're watching a football or soccer match, and Arsenal's got whoever, Crystal Palace on their heels right now. Like what does that mean? Well, Crystal Palace is in trouble.
Yeah.
And so if you set up on your heels before you hit a golf shot, you're in trouble before the club's even moved, I believe. I haven't seen anyone who does it very well.
So just that very point there, Scott, for an awful lot of folks listening, because I see this day in, day out, where people are set up and they're out of balance to begin with, and then trying to fight positions in the golf swing.
100%.
So an awful lot could be gained from just that simple awareness of where your balance is at address.
And I think that's where your feeling of where you are at address can be completely, like, you may feel balanced until you look at the force plate and be like, oh my gosh, I'm not. And that's why what I tell, like, your feelings change every day. Like some days you may have to feel like you're way towards your toes to be balanced. And some days you might have to feel like you're way towards your heels to be balanced, because the brain does funny things to us in terms of how we perceive what's actually happening. A lot of people say feels are not reals. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt, but that's so interesting because, one of the things I've explored a lot with players over these last few years is about, the myth of consistency and things like that, and the need for adaptability.
Yeah.
But I believe, and you just reinforced that, a really important question for every player at every level, but especially top players, is asking the question, what have I got today?
100%.
What have I got today in terms of shot shape? What have I got today? And you're reinforced. What have I got today in terms of balance?
Yep. And that's where my good friend John Dunnigan, I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He's
I had John on the show.
Oh, you've had John on the show. Okay, so I'm sure you've heard this before, but every time I've seen John do a lecture for a bunch of PGA pros or a bunch of golf teachers, he'll go to the crowd and say, who's the best golf teacher who ever lived? And he'll pan the crowd, and people will be like, Butch Harmon, and somebody said Harvey Pennick last time I did this, and David Ledbetter and
John Jacobs,
whatever, right? They go through, and whoever it is, it doesn't matter. He says, no, you're all wrong. It's Goldilocks. And I'm sure he said this on your show, but to me, the Goldilocks...
He didn't actually, but I know what it's going on.
The Goldilocks drill is the best one ever. So like what I tell people, if you're not sure where you're balanced, you explore, like go to your toes and feel like you're almost going to fall over. Now go to your heels and feel like you're almost going to fall over. And now try to find halfway in between that. That's going to be pretty close to being somewhat balanced, because you know where the edges live. But if you always live in your heel a little towards your toes, going to feel like, oh my God, I'm going to fall over. No, you're not. You're not even close to that. That's just your feel that's developed that. And so Doing Goldilocks drills to me is one of the best ways ever to determine what's optimal for you on that particular day in your swing. Because like what I told you is the best players that I've been around dial in the pressure shift into their trail side. How much they get into their trail side for their stock move should be the same all the time. And if it's different all the time, that's when we get off. Like that's when wedges become really good. I can't find my driver anymore. Um, and so what I kind of do whenever, I mean, I hardly play golf anymore. I have a 3-year-old son and another on the way. So I played
That
one round of
changes
golf.
things.
Yeah, it changes things. I played one round of 18-hole golf in 2025, last year. And I hit it great. Because I went to the range beforehand and I put little sets of 3 balls, and I hit one where I feel like I get as far off it as I can. And I hit one where I feel like I stay on top of it, and I kind of notice what the ball does when I do that. And then I try to find one in the middle, and I try to play with my middle feel until it gets to where I'm kind of hitting it well, and then I have my feel for the day. Sometimes it might have to feel like I get way more off of it. Sometimes it might feel like I have to stay on top of it a little more, just depending on how you feel. But, and I think whatever you're working on in your golf swing, going to the range and playing the Goldilocks game is one of the best things you can do.
You could look at it for literally anything in the game.
Literally
whether
anything.
you're working on club face, strike location, ground contact.
Yep. Whatever.
Upright, flat, whatever it is, you can use the Goldilocks principle.
Yep.
Can't you?
And what I
and to be honest, Scott,
Go ahead,
I think that people have such a poor relationship to error that they don't want to go there.
Totally.
Everybody, we're all trying to get it right, aren't we?
Yep.
But the brain doesn't learn efficiently that way.
Nope. So I've told that I did a PGA section, the Southern California section recently, and told them, so my son is 3 years old. He's going to be 3 in a couple of weeks. And so a year and a half ago or so, or almost 2 years ago now, I watched him learn how to walk. And like everybody on the planet's learned how to walk. It's one of the first, major motor skills that we learn how to do. And we had a big playpen that he played in, and I watched him kind of climb his way up the wall and hold on to the edge of it and learn how to kind of manipulate gravity and be vertical. And then once he decided to let go of that, he fell on his butt a bunch of times. And then after falling on his butt a bunch of times, he's like, well, that's no fun. I got to start getting my center of mass forward. And then he did a bunch of miraculous face plants. Like there were some that were, luckily he was in a little padded area and it didn't hurt himself. But watching him butt for a while and then get moving forward and do a few face plants is how he learned how to walk, because he failed and he failed and then he found the middle. And to me, that's what I tell people. Like when I go to my lab and I look at like a piece of turf with 4 plates and a net and a screen, or when I go to the range and it's just like a big open field, like that is for you to learn. Those areas are both there for you to learn and to explore. And the way that we learn motor skills is way different than we learn cognitive skills. Like if I told you to do math, I'm teaching you how to do math. Like remember when you did your times tables in junior school or whatever? Like if I told you what's 2 times 2 and you said 76, I wouldn't be like, good job, great work. Like, but when my son's fallen on his butt, or when somebody like shanks it on the range on purpose, I'm like, great job. Like that was
Fantastic.
good. You learned something there. And so I think we got to be careful, because like when we learn cognitive skills, we want to repeat it over and over again and do it right every time. That's the worst way to learn a motor skill, because it doesn't give you any context. And I always ask all the teachers that I work with, everybody in the world who plays golf has gone to the range and striped every single one of them, then gone to the golf course and it's all over the place, right? Everybody's had that happen to them, because you didn't learn anything on the range.
No.
You repeated something and imitated very well, and then you got to the golf course and didn't own it. And so
you repeated 2 + 2, and then all of a sudden you got asked the Pythagorean equation.
Totally, yeah. And you had no way to conceptualize that. And so I love when people fail on purpose on the range or on the golf course. And I was at Dallas National, which is a very high-end club in Dallas, and one of the best players in the world came. So I was working with somebody kind of in a bay right here, and he came to the bay over there and set up and started to hit shots. This is, he was probably a top 20, 15 player in the world. He's had some injuries since then, but a really good player came to hit balls. And I felt kind of bad, but I was kind of paying more attention to what he was doing to what the person was doing.
God, not to.
Yeah. But he warmed up, hit some shots, and then he got driver out, and he teed up a driver and he hit a shot. And I was watching him, and you can generally tell when good players hit a bad shot, right? You can see it in their face and their mannerisms. He hit a shot and he posed like he had just striped it right down the middle, and that ball went out and snap sliced.
Yep.
And I watched it and I was like, does he not have his contacts in? Like, did he not see where that thing went? That was terrible. And then he
Yeah.
hit another one, did the exact same thing. And I was like, whoa, like what's going on here? Like this guy. And then he teed up another one, posed, and hit a snap hook. And then did another one, hit a snap hook. And then the fifth one was like piped.
Yeah.
And that was his plan. Like, and when he knows where, I mean, I didn't talk to him about it, but it seemed to me like he did it on purpose. Like he was knowing where this
learning
lives.
through error.
And this lives. Yep. And the other story I tell, my wife's a college golf coach in Los Angeles. And when she first started, her team wasn't very good. And one of her players got the shanks right before conference championship. And she was super concerned because, you know, she would normally shoot, you know, between 75 and 80. And then, but she had these 1 or 2 hosel rockets around that would turn into a triple, and that would turn into an 85. And she was like scared to death of it. So my wife asked me to work with her right before conference to try to figure it out. And she came into my garage, this old garage I used to have with like a net in front of her. And she started hitting shots. And like, I don't know, maybe the 10th or 11th one, she hit her hosel rocket. And she went, there it is. Oh my God, that's the one. What happened? I don't know.
Terrified of that.
Terrified of it. And I looked at the fourth place and I said, look, like when you set up, you're entirely on your heels, which like we talked about, she would dive towards and hit the shank. So we started to work on some Goldilocks drills and got her kind of, and basically we said, go to your heels, go to your toes, now find the middle. And when she found the middle, her head, she was still, I would say probably like 70% in her heels. So I said, well, now go to your heels, go to your toes, and then find, I don't know, like 75% into your toes. And that's what got her balance, that feel.
Right.
And then she started hitting perfect shots every time. Like, and she was super happy. She was hitting the middle of the face. Everything was good when she did her little rock before she hit it. And she was ready to leave. And I said, wait. Before you leave, get back on the plates. And I want you to drop back onto your heels and hit me a couple balls.
And deliberately do it.
What? She's like, why? I was like, let's just try and see what happens. And the third one, she hosel rocket and shanked it. And she went, look, I shanked it. And I was like, you're fixed. Because she wasn't scared of that shot anymore. Like if you know where, like everybody in golf has a shot that they absolutely hate, right? The one that you're like, oh my God. Mine's the snap hook. Because when I was a little kid, my little baby draw that was really nice for me when I was 10, 11 years old turned into a snap hook when I was 13 and 14. And I went from shooting like high 70s, mid 70s to 90s because you can't talk to a snap hook. That thing just keeps running until it finds out of bounds or water or whatever. I think some of those balls were like coming back at me at some point at one point.
Boomerang.
I hate that shot. But now doing all the stuff that I've done, I know how to hit that shot on purpose. Like I can do that shot on purpose. So I'm not afraid of it anymore.
If you can hit it on purpose, you can not hit it on purpose.
Exactly. Yeah. And I had another opportunity doing that with another best player in the world that this guy literally has won major championships and is very good. And I tried to add speed to him by doing like a Kyle Berkshire rocking drill. And that turned his little cut into a snap hook. And then when I looked at the force plates, it meant he was getting more pressure to his trail side than normal. And I said, do the opposite of that. And his little cut came back. And so to me, that is one of the best learning tools, is to be able to hit bad shots on purpose. Yeah. And don't be afraid to do it on a range, because that's where you learn. That's your playpen.
Just on that then, Scott, and I'm probably going to answer my own question here. What would your view, but I'll ask it anyway.
Okay.
What would your view be on a lot of the sort of training aids that people try and use? Were you constrained into doing it correctly?
Yeah. I mean, it's okay in moderation, as is anything. Like if you don't know what it feels like I was just looking at a video with I forget what they call it, the widener or whatever. It like goes under your thing and goes, because a lot of good players don't have a very bent elbow if it keeps it wide. That's great. So like if you don't know what that feels like and you get that training aid on and you kind of feel what it feels like, but you can't become dependent on it. You got to get rid of it quickly.
Shouldn't be there all the time.
Totally. Get rid of it quickly and then actually do the opposite of it. Like try to hit shots when bend your arm too much. And then that'll show you, okay, when my arm bends too much, what does the ball do? What do I feel? Okay. And when this thing's on, what does the ball do? What do I feel? And then get rid of it and try to make this feel and try to make this feel. And to me, I don't think training aids, there's no training aid. I don't think well, I can probably think of, but anyways, I would probably say there's no real training aid or no drill that's wrong for everyone. Like stack and tilt got some, some people are afraid of it. It's like a dirty word in golf for some people, but those concepts I use often with players because it helps some people for sure.
Yeah. It's going to be beneficial for somebody in a certain situation, isn't it?
But it could be the absolute worst thing for somebody in a certain situation as well. So we have to make sure we know who to give it to and who not to.
I was only at a seminar recently I was doing, and Bruce Lee has been a great fascination of mine
Yep.
for many, many years. And one of the tenets that he wrote towards the end of his life, he wrote 4 tenets of getting good at anything. And one of the tenets was, the first tenet was, research your own experience. And I think that's exactly what we're talking about here, isn't it? Is research your own experience, because it's not going to be anybody else's experience. And I, I,
100%.
I don't, I think we spend too much time in the golf world saying, Rory does this and Jordan does that, and it's all well and good and interesting, but it doesn't research your own experience, does it?
Totally. Yeah, I agree. I tell that to people often. The John Rahm, like I love how John Rahm takes it back short and kind of shallows it. And I go to the person, I'm like, I got some bad news for you. You're not John Rahm.
No, no, no.
And Rory does some incredible things in his golf swing, but again, he's one of the 5 or 6 people in the world who have won the Grand Slam of golf. Like, comparing yourself to Rory is a ridiculous comparison. Like, he is one of the 5 best people, I would say, to ever play the game.
That's comparing a park runner with Usain Bolt, isn't it? I mean,
Totally, yeah.
Totally.
It's comparing some guy jogging along the street there to Usain Bolt. Like, it's just not a fair comparison.
It's not a relevant comparison, isn't it?
Exactly. But I think there are things we can learn of everything. So like where you experiment, like, because I have a lot of, you see a lot of long drivers, and Rory does a little bit too, where the lead heel lifts and then it lands towards the target a little bit more. So they almost turn their hip into internal, or they turn their foot a little internally or rotate it inwards. And I've seen some people that watch long drivers do that and try it. And like, I think depending on how your hip is built, that could be okay for you, or it could be the worst thing for you and put you in the hospital. And so experimenting, I think, is fine. And I think experimenting on force plates is even better, because force plates to me are like a neurological exam, because they take 1,000 pictures every second of how your body interacts with the ground. So they collected 1,000 hertz. Whereas if you just take your iPhone out and take a video, I think standard is like 30 to 60. And so it's taking, more than 100 times or 100-ish times more pictures per second than your iPhone. And what I'm finding, and I see this a lot in baseball, is when somebody's trying something that doesn't match, like, and again, I think your brain's goal is to keep your body safe.
Yeah.
And if you're
First
trying
and
to
foremost.
do something that your brain knows is not safe, those graphs get really bumpy, because you have these little neural freakouts that the force plate measures, but you may not see with your eye, or you may not even feel. And so I make decisions often when I'm working with somebody on force plates based on how smooth the graphs are. Because if I give them something to do and the graphs get bumpier and messier, I abort mission often. I'm like, hey, that thing we just did, let's abort mission. Let's go in the other direction. Because, and I think in the past, without force plates, you could keep going down that road. How many golf teachers have you gone to a lesson and you've hit it horribly, and they're like, just keep working on that thing. And you spend months and months or weeks and weeks working on it and ingraining this pattern that may not be right for you. And so I think we make those, or I feel like we make those decisions a lot better and easier
with that knowledge of what's actually
happening. And I was just at the Southern California PGA section teaching summit, and I can't think of her name now. A very prominent LPGA pro was giving a keynote lecture there, because her PGA pro was from the Southern California section. They talked about her journey, and she was one of the best players in the world, winning majors, hitting a cut, and somebody decided or told her that she should hit draws. And she worked on hitting draws for a really long time and worked her way like almost completely off the tour and hurt herself. She got 2 bad hips, and so probably better we don't say names. But to me, I think if I could get in a time machine and go back to the first day on the range, she decided to hit draws and just measured her cut swing and her draw swing and looked at those graphs, I think you could have shown up. You could have cut out a lot of pain and a lot of bad golf and shortened that learning experience very quickly.
And the game's littered with history of players that, Martin Keimer, I can think of, would to go from one shape to another. Back to so we talked about address and balance there, and how that could be a real gain for everybody, just to be aware of that. Then once the thing starts, the initial motion, and I know again we're generalizing here, but what are your kind of summary generalizations on that? About does the club move the pressure? Does the pressure move the club? Is there anything that you sort of suggest people explore with that?
Well, to me, we have to learn how to separate mass because the club has a mass and the body has a mass from pressure. Because a lot of people assume they're the same thing. And I think if I move mass and pressure very slowly, like if I move my mass and my pressure over to the right, and then I move my mass and my pressure over to the left, that is not a very athletic move.
Yeah.
And if you think of like Kyle Berkshire, when he used to do this stomping thing, he would stomp and he would put his right foot down and his pressure would zoom over to his right side. And as the club's going back, he would actually be moving his mass to the left. So like separating mass and pressure is what very good athletes do. And I think poor athletes try to keep mass and pressure together the whole time. And I think what I'm trying to do a lot with golfers now is limit mass movement away from the target on the backswing, because I don't see too many good players that have excessive mass movement, but sometimes it involves getting more pressure into the right foot or the trail foot, but not as much mass.
But not through mass.
Not through mass. Yeah, moving. I don't see a whole lot of good players that move a lot of mass to the right. I mean, or away from the target. Sorry, I'm a little biased towards right-handers because I mostly work with right-handed golfers. And that's something that, I would say maybe long drivers are the ones that might get mass moving to the right a little bit more because they're super athletic. I mean, if you can hit a ball 400, 500 yards, then you might be able to recover from there. But that is a common issue that I see. People go to Golf Digest magazines or watch YouTube and they say, well, no, you got to move off the ball a little bit. And a lot of people are not athletic enough to recover from there. And I think that's where, more of a stacky type feel can be helpful for some people, because if you get, and what we talk about now quite a bit is leg bias in golf, like what leg you're more biased towards in your swing.
Right.
They used to call it as posting, like lead post or trail post. Now I kind of like the bias because like some people will get more pressure bias towards their right foot or the trail foot. Some people will bias more towards their lead foot. Some people will stay kind of using both feet equally. And I think that's something that you need to Goldilocks for yourself. And figure out what's optimal for you. Like if you have a very strong, active right leg or trail leg, then you might be able to bias more towards that and get off of it and be able to produce good shots. But if you don't, like if you're a left leg biased person, you try to swing right leg biased, it can be awful. Like you can be very fat shots and low point control's terrible, and it can be just not good.
And how would you find out your leg bias? Would that just be from using the force plates?
Yeah, you can get at it a lot easier from doing the force plates, or just, I would say if you don't have force plates, just go to the range and do your Goldilocks drills. So I would say like get a ball, and generally, I would just take a 7-iron or something and hit it off the ground because that can help. And just try to move off it as much as you can. Like feel like you're trying to like get off of it as far as you can and hit me 3 or 4 shots. And then what I want you to do is kind of like feel like you stay stacked on top of it, like almost lean left as you take the club away and hit me 3 or 4 shots. And then give me one that feels in the middle of those 3 things. And generally when I play Goldilocks drills during a session with a player, I'll do that. I'll have them hit 3 in one way, 3 in the other way, and 3 in the third way. And when I do it indoors with my launch monitor, I can label the 3 shots differently. So it looks at the club speeds for the 3 different shots, all the things that you can look at. And so, but before I have them look at any of the data or the information after they've done that drill, I say, okay, now you got to go to the first tee and play your buddy in a $1,000 Nassau. $1,000 a hole Nassau. Which one of the 3 are you using? And that is a very telling tale. Most of the time with a lot of people, you can eliminate one of them for sure. Like, oh, it's definitely not this one because I hit 3 feet behind it 3 times. Like, okay, that one's out. Okay, perfect. This one was okay, but I kind of didn't like the really cuttiness to it. This one was okay, but I'm like, okay, well, now let's take these 2 and find the middle here. So we've eliminated that one, but let's take these 2 and find the middle here. Or like, this one was a big snap hook and this one was kind of a weak fade. And so playing the games helps you learn. And I haven't found too many people who live way out on the edges. Most people live somewhere in the middle. And I feel like that's a good discussion for our political leaders at the current moment. Most of the time, the answer is in the middle somewhere.
I think in this current climate, we better stay away from politics. That
we
might
will
lead
too.
down a very dark alleyway.
But I think as in golf, as in anything, most of the time the answer is somewhere in the middle.
Somewhere in the middle.
Yes.
Yeah. As you say, it depends.
Yeah.
In terms of what you see on the force plates, for some of the sort of classic faults in the golf swing, you know, the sort of classic out and over, steep on the downswing, where people are maybe trying to work on shallowing the club? I know you said it's chicken and egg and you can work both ways. Do you see a lot of opportunity for people to maybe improve the motion of the club by being aware of the motion of the feet and the ground reaction?
100%. So like now my assessment is, and I always think of golf swings now in kind of two ways, and baseball's really helped me with this. So like if we think of anatomical planes of motion, so like this would be like a frontal plane.
Yeah.
Like if you looked at me from face on, and if you had a camera from above and you looked at kind of like a tabletop plane, that would be a transverse plane. So a pure frontal plane golf swing would look like this. If I lifted a club or a golf club up and I just dropped it on the ball, that'd be a pure frontal plane golf swing.
Yeah.
And I've never seen a golf swing that looks like that. And then if I had a club that looked like this and I like spun it around like this, that'd be a pure transverse plane
Pure
golf swing.
horizontal.
Yeah. And the only time I've seen a swing that looks like that is there's trick shot guys who tee up a ball like 3 feet off the ground. But this in baseball happens. There is time in baseball where the ball's up here and I got to figure out how to move the bat in this way. And that's what's really helped me understand like what the ground forces are to move the club in this way and what the ground forces are to move the club in this way.
Right.
Are completely different. And
right.
And so now that's kind of how I categorize every golf swing is somewhere in between there and there. And I would say like this is kind of like Matt Kuchar, right? Like really flat, deep hands. And this would be like Dustin Johnson, Justin Thomas, like really high hands above.
Yep.
And so a lot of times those people who are working on shallowing the club, if you don't have the ground forces that are necessary to do that, the answer might be just get the club in a like make it shallow already. Right. Because then if your little steepening move puts you here, you're fine. But if you're up here, that little steepening move puts you there, then you're screwed. And so the answer could be repositioning the club to match. And this is what I talk about now with the force plates. So basically when somebody hits on the plates, I look at your engine in the frontal plane and I look at your engine in the transverse plane and I look at where you choose to position the club. And it's a matchup game. So if I'm more efficient in the frontal plane, I want my hands up higher. And if I'm more in the transverse plane, I want my hands deeper. And if there's a mismatch, the question is, do you change the ground forces to match where the hands already are? Or do you change the hands to match, what the ground is doing? So, and I don't know the answer to that question. It's more of an art than a science, I think, at that point to determine where the answer lies.
Options.
Yeah. I've worked a ton recently with Greg Rose, who is the inventor of the Titleist Performance Institute, one of the co-developers of it. And it's rare that he works with a 20 handicap, right? He's pretty much working with the best players in the world all the time.
Yeah.
And he told me, I don't like to touch a good player's hands, like where their hands are positioned. If you took Matt Kuchar and said, hey, Matt, I want you to move your hands up here, I think he's going to tell you where to go. Don't think he's going to do that. And so he generally tries to tweak the ground forces to get a better match with where that club is positioned. But I've worked with college kids recently who are really good players that I basically just said, hey, get the club a little closer to the ceiling this time than it is to the back wall. And said nothing else, and club speed's gone up like 5 or 6 miles an hour, and ball speed goes way up, and so that just puts the club in the same plane where they're already efficient. And so, but other times it's a harder discussion with people, like which way to attack it. Do you attack the position of the club, or do you attack the ground forces? And again, a lot of times I'll ask people, like some of these good players, like the guy that, played in the PGA Championship and made the cut, I was like, when you're playing your best, what's the flight? And generally, more torque or more rotational transverse plane players kind of get that club exiting more out to in and creates more of a fade. So if they're like, oh, when I play my best, I was always a fade, that kind of cues me towards, okay, maybe the transverse plane is better for that person. Or, it ends, with the high hands, kind of this move, that's going to shallow it and create more of a rightward swing direction or into out swing direction. But you never know, like, because if you think of Dustin Johnson, his hands are super high and he's a fader of the ball. And so there are ways to manipulate it to hit any shot from either of those patterns. But, and that's why it's a complicated discussion with really good players in which direction to go. With Mrs. Haberkamp, I generally just make the decision for him or her. Somebody who's not a very good player, and they just want to find it. Sometimes it's going towards, that lead leg bias swing, because I think it's the simplest way to hit a golf ball. Like I have told some players in the past, your golf swing is on the backswing, your body goes down, your arms go up, and on the downswing, your body goes up, your arms go down. And it's the easiest way to get the ball first and hit it before you hit the ground, and just to pop it out there. I mean, it's not the best way to be a long driver or to,
No.
do a lot of the
But
things
it's
that good
efficient
players.
making contact with the ground.
Totally. And I had one
Yeah.
guy I told that to, and he's like, but I read Golf Digest and it told me I had to do, and I was like, there's no rule book on how you have to swing this thing. You can do it however you want.
But generally, if somebody is getting steep, what would be a fix from a ground perspective that could help somebody shallow it?
I mean, we would have to add a little bit more frontal plane forces. So adding more lateral force would be a way to kind of introduce that. But that gets complicated because then we need a braking mechanism when we go lateral, right? We have to stop ourselves, or else we glide way past it and we can get in trouble there. So, so I think you got one of two options. You can add more of that lateral force, because like if I have my hands up here and I kind of move laterally, that can produce a shallowing action. So that's one option, but it's a very difficult move to make because now we got to learn how to move laterally, put on the brakes, and do all those things. And then the other option is just to get the club shallow already. If the club's up here, like just get it back here where it's shallow. So then your little move puts it back on plane where you need it. And so, and I think there were some golf teachers that I've worked with in the past. They have a bunch of like golf camps they do, basically, where people come in for 3 or 4 days, and they said the only person they have a very unique case where a guy was bringing it in and he was tipping it like way out here and just had no chance. And every teacher in the clinic, they have 4 or 5 teachers, gave him everything possible to try to fix it, and they couldn't fix it. And so the last day, one of the teachers brought in a set of left-handed clubs, just the opposite side clubs, and said, can you just hold it like this and swing it like this? And it like shallowed and like worked perfectly. So their fix was to put the person on the opposite side of the ball. And to me, that kind of makes sense when it comes to the leg bias thing, because like they may have been trying to use the ground in a way that didn't match their leg bias, but flipping them on the other side made it match better. And we don't have any force plates on that person, but it was an interesting test case where literally just getting them a set of clubs on the other side fixed the issues.
Knowing the way golfers are, I can see a bunch of people getting a set of left-handed clubs just in case.
I don't know how often it is the solution, but it could be.
But it comes back to this, what we've talked about all night, is the willingness to explore and research your own experience.
100%. I think that is the whole goal. And I think the people who enjoy that, who get on a range and love playing, right? Yeah. Playing on the range and like hitting low shots, try to top it on purpose. I got the opportunity to work with another guy who is, one of the top players in the world, playing one of the favorites this week at Augusta. And we, at the end of the day, after we finished working, he's like, you want to see my like party trick? And I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. And he took his driver and teed up a ball and said, I'm going to swing full speed so that the launch monitor says the exact same number that it said before in terms of club speed, like whatever it was, 125 miles an hour. But I'm going to nick the top of this ball so it doesn't even make it to the net. So he's going to top it on purpose so that it just like, you know how hard that is? And I saw him do it 3 times in a row. That's a really
skill.
hard. Yeah.
That's real skill.
That's real skill. And he's just learned that by playing, right? Like, but to me, for a good player like him, if he gets a few shots thin on the course, he's doing a microcosm of what he did to top it on purpose, and he can fix it then on the next. Like if he hits 1 or 2 shots thin, okay, well that's kind of, I'm doing a little bit of what I do to hit my topper shot, so let me just fix it a little bit, and then the next ones get better. And
I think the message, for me, Scott, that's really interesting with this is just giving the message to your brain that it's safe to explore. It's safe to explore these options, that you're not going to beat the crap out of yourself just because you've hit a shot offline. You're going to give yourself permission to do that.
Totally.
So we're reducing the threat in the brain, which allows movement to emerge.
100%. And I think I say that often to golfers when they're in my lab, because in my lab, they hit into a net, and the net is positioned in a way that like even the worst shank gets into the net. Yeah. And it hits the net and it drops. And I'm like, nobody died. Everybody's fine. Yeah. Like, let's play. This game's supposed to be fun. Like, let's, why are we all doing this? Most of us don't do this to make our living, right? It's supposed to be fun. So let's explore, let's have some fun. And like when my wife's player laughed at her shank, I was like, okay, you're good. You're ready to go.
Yep. Run the way.
Because that is okay. It's not going to kill anyone. I mean, maybe on the golf course it could kill somebody, right? If there's a gallery and stuff. So, but that's where taking a driving range and playing those games, so you know where those things live on the range, so that
Yeah.
when you get under pressure and you get in a place, you know how to
You
stay
can
away from
adapt.
those type
Yeah.
of things. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and I mean, and we need to make the range and the indoor center and the place that we practice this game like the playpen where my son learned how to walk. It's a safe
Yeah.
space for you to fail and learn
Yeah.
how to move better.
Yeah. Which I think, as we said when we were just chatting before we started, I think where the Zen green stage and linking it was just such a phenomenal piece of kit to explore all these different options.
I agree. And so there's two common issues you see in golfers. It's like that movement towards the golf ball. Like if you
Yeah.
and your downswing move towards the golf ball, you're in trouble. Like there's
Yeah.
not a lot of space for your arms and hands to do what we need them to do. And the other one is a lot of people get moving laterally too much and they don't know how to put on the brake. So they glide past it and they have to release and they can't, hold the angles in their wrists and all those things. And that green stage is an unbelievable fix for both of those things.
Yeah.
Because what I'll
Yeah.
do is if people are moving towards the golf ball, I'll take the stage and put the ball below their feet like this.
Yeah.
So now gravity's trying to pull them down there and their brain has to go like, oh my God, I got to figure out how to stop this. And most people in a couple of shots will figure out how to stop it. And then the opposite is if I'm gliding too much past it, I take the ground and put it like this. So you're on a downhill slope now. And so if you glide way past it, it makes it worse. So you got to figure out how to put on the brakes and do the things that you need to do.
Yeah.
And I was working with a Champions Tour player that came to see me because he was almost off the Champions Tour. Like he was shooting 75 every time and finishing way down the list and was ready to pack it in. And I put him on the plates and told him that his lateral braking is not good. And I think that's where he's losing some speed. And I gave him some drills to work on it. And then I said, the other thing that I think, could be very helpful is hitting balls off a downhill slope.
Yep.
Because that's going to cue you to, and he's like, oh my goodness. And he kind of got quiet for a second. I was like, what? And he's like, I've probably played Augusta National a couple hundred times in my life between practice rounds, tournament rounds, and when people have invited me up to play. Like this guy was on Ryder Cups. Like he was a good player. So he's like, I probably played a couple hundred times in my life. And he's like, I've never been long enough to get to the bottom of the hill on 9. So I always have a downhill lie to an uphill green, which is a really hard shot for most golfers. He's like, I can't think of a bad shot I've ever hit into that green.
Really?
Because it forces him in his swing to do things that we're trying to make him do in his regular swing. He's like,
And he matched that up straight away. And
he matched it up. And he's like, I can't, of those hundreds of rounds I played at Augusta National, I can't think of
Never
a
had a
bad
bad
shot
shot.
I've ever hit there because as an athlete, he solved that problem and made the ground or made his body do the things that I want him to do on flat ground.
Yeah.
And when we got him to do it on flat ground, things improved quite a bit. So that was a very interesting, unique story and I think using the slopes as a constraint in your instruction is a great thing. Now, I like the swing stage because I don't know a place where I could go hit a bucket of balls off a downhill slope. I know a couple golf holes who have it, but the greenskeeper is going to be pretty upset with me if I take a bucket of balls.
I'm smiling, Scott, because we talked about great coaches before. I know back in the 1950s and 60s, John Jacobs was always getting people to hit balls above the feet, below the feet, downhill, uphill, because at some instinctive level he would have understood exactly what you've been
100%.
talking about.
And I don't think that's something that I don't think I'm inventing anything new with any of this. Another story, I was at the Villages in Florida teaching a bunch of golf teachers about the force plates. And the Villages is like an older age community, so all the teachers are relatively older. And one of their teachers has played in the Masters 5 or 6 times. Like he was a really good player in his day. And one thing I talk about with people who, if I want them to get more lateral force, one of the constraints I'll do is I'll tee the ball up like miles forward in their stance. I'm like, put that ball forward in your stance because it gives you more incentive to go get it. And he got that same look that the other Champions Tour player, he's like, oh my goodness. And I was like, what? He came up to me afterwards and he was like, I played the Masters in 60 something. And on Friday it rained, and so everybody left. But then it stopped raining, and I went to the range, and the only other 2 people on the range were Hogan hitting balls, and I think it was like Weiskopf sitting down behind him watching him. And I was right behind them hitting balls. And he said, as Hogan was hitting them, Weiskopf is like, why the hell do you have the ball teed up way up in front there? Like, what are you doing? He's like, well, this is a drill. It's teaching me to go get it. And he's like, you said the exact same words in your little thing here that I heard from Ben Hogan back in 19 whatever. And I was like, Shoot, I
figured
thought
it
I
out.
made that up.
Figured it out.
I mean, there were brilliant people playing this game, and I think there's wisdom in all of that stuff. And I think just the science can help us understand when it's important. Because
Yeah.
just because Hogan did that doesn't mean everybody should do that.
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
I think my goal is to answer that question. It depends on what. And once it
Yeah.
depends, and if we can get better answers to what it depends on, I think then we can help everyone to solve those little, like you say, those n=1 problems that each of us have to solve.
Scott, I was looking forward to the conversation. It's exceeded all expectations. It was great. I could talk with you. I've talked with you all night. It's fabulous information. That let people know about where they can find out about you and the things that you do and etc. and the plates.
If you go to swingcatalyst.com, we have all our information on there. There's a academy there where we have a bunch of online educational resources. I think there's also like a map where you can kind of find users that have Swing Catalyst in your area. If you want to get on a force plates, you can do that. Most people that want to contact me do it through social media, and I'm awful at social media. I don't even remember what my
man after my own heart.
what do you call it? Handle is. So I always have to look it up when I do these things. So on Instagram, I am D as in dog, R as in rock, and then SK Lynn. So DRSKLYNN. That is my Instagram thing. I think that's how most people get in touch with me there. Some people also choose email. So my university, it's slynn@fullerton.edu. So if you need to get in touch with me there, that is a good way to do it as well.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was fun.
Mind Caddy.